February 12th, 1944. Hingham Shipyard, Massachusetts. The telegram arrives at 0600 hours, delivered by a Western Union boy whose breath fogs in the pre-dawn cold. Foreman William Bill McGrath holds it under the yellow glow of a dock lamp, reading it once, twice, then a third time, as if repetition might change the words. Around him, the shipyard is already alive. The clang of riveting hammers, the hiss of acetylene torches, the grinding screech of cranes swinging steel plate over half-assembled hulls. Somewhere in the din, a welding arc flashes white-hot, throwing shadows across McGrath's weathered face. DE 635. Priority. Alpha. Delivery. 17 days from receipt. Kaiser method authorized. No excuses. Lives depend on it. 17 days. McGrath folds the telegram and slips it into his coat pocket, his calloused fingers trembling not from cold but from the weight of what's being asked. The Hingham Yard has been turning out destroyer escorts at a respectable clip, one every 45 days, sometimes 38 if everything goes right. But 17? That's not shipbuilding. That's assembling a jigsaw puzzle while the house burns down around you. He turns toward the main assembly slip, where the keel plates for USS England are scheduled to be laid this morning. The ship doesn't have a name yet officially. She's just DE 635, another number in the Navy's desperate scramble to plug the holes in the Atlantic convoy routes. But McGrath already thinks of her as England, after Ensign John C. England, who died at Pearl Harbor. The name feels right, noble, worth the impossible. Bill! The shout comes from Tommy Delacroix, the yard's head welder, a wiry Cajun from Louisiana who can run a bead so clean it looks like machine work. He's jogging across the frozen mud, his welding hood pushed back, his face smudged with carbon. "You see the wire?" Tommy asks, panting clouds of vapor. "Saw it. 17 days. They serious?" McGrath doesn't answer immediately. He's watching the dawn light creep over Boston Harbor, turning the ice-skimmed water from black to gunmetal gray. Out there, beyond the horizon, convoys are being torn apart by U-boats. Merchant sailors are drowning in oil-slicked water, screaming for help that won't come because there aren't enough escorts. Every day the Navy waits for a new destroyer escort is another day Hitler's wolf packs hunt freely. "Dead serious," McGrath finally says. "You ever heard of Henry Kaiser?" Tommy spits into the snow. "That crazy son of a bitch building Liberty ships out in California? Yeah, I heard of him. Builds them like Fords on an assembly line." "That's the one. Navy says we're doing it his way now. Pre-fabricated sections, modular assembly. We're gonna build this ship like a kid, building with blocks." Tommy stares at him. "Bill, with all respect, that's insane. A Liberty ship's a floating shoebox. This is a warship. You can't just—" "We can and we will." McGrath's voice is iron. "I need you to round up every welder, fitter, and rigger in the yard. Main assembly hall, 10 minutes. No exceptions." Tommy hesitates, then nods and jogs off into the maze of scaffolding and steel. McGrath stands alone for a moment, watching the first rays of sun touch the empty slip where England will be born. Somewhere in his gut, beneath the doubt and the fear, something else stirs, something that feels almost like excitement. Because if they can do this, if they can prove that American ingenuity and raw determination can compress 45 days of work into 17, they won't just build a ship, they'll build a blueprint for victory. He pulls the telegram out again, reads the last line once more. Lives depend on it. McGrath crumples the paper in his fist and starts walking toward the assembly hall, his boots crunching through the frozen slush. Behind him, the sun continues to rise, and the shipyard roars with industry. 17 days. It starts now. February 12th, 1944. 0615 hours. Maine. Assembly hall. 300 men pack into the cavernous space, their collective breath rising like steam from a locomotive. They stand in their work clothes, canvas jackets stiff with grease, dungarees patched at the knees, steel-toed boots caked in mud and metal shavings. These are the men who've been building ships the old way. Keel to superstructure. Bow to stern. One section at a time. In careful sequence. They're good at it. Damn good. But good isn't fast enough anymore. McGrath climbs onto a welding table, his silhouette backlit by the harsh overhead floods. He doesn't raise his voice. Doesn't need to. The hammering outside stops as word spreads that something big is happening. 17 days, he says, letting the number hang in the air like a challenge. That's what Washington wants. That's what the boys dying in the Atlantic need. And that's what we're going to give them. A murmur ripples through the crowd. McGrath sees doubt on every face. Good. Doubt means they're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Old Bill's finally cracked. Maybe I have. But before you write me off, I want you to understand something. He pulls a rolled blueprint from under his arm and unfurls it against the wall. It's not a traditional ship design. It's a schematic that looks more like an exploded diagram from a mechanic's manual, showing the destroyer Escort broken into dozens of separate modules. This is Henry Kaiser's gift to us. He's been building Liberty ships in California, using something he calls modular prefabrication. Instead of building the ship in sequence, we build different sections simultaneously. Bow section, stern section, midship, superstructure, all at the same time in different parts of the yard. Then we bring them together and weld them into one hull. Tommy Delacroix pushes forward through the crowd. Bill, I've seen Kaiser's work. It's revolutionary for cargo ships, sure. But a destroyer Escort? She's got to make 24 knots, carry depth charges, mount 3-inch guns. You're talking about precision engineering, not hauling grain. I'm talking about saving lives, McGrath shoots back. Every U-boat we don't kill because we don't have enough escorts is another 100 sailors who don't come home. Kaiser's method works because it's parallel, not sequential. We can have 8 teams working on 8 different sections, instead of one team waiting for another to finish. He points to different men in the crowd as he speaks. Kowalski, your team starts on the forward engine room module. Chen, you take the aft deckhouse. Delacroix, I want you personally supervising every major weld junction this whole thing lives or dies on your seams. Murphy, you're coordinating crane operations. We're going to be moving 40-ton sections like chess pieces. A voice from the back, Frank Murphy. The crane boss, a bear of a man with hands like coal shovels. What about tolerances? You're talking about building pieces separately and hoping they fit together like a watch. 1/16 of an inch off and we've got gaps we can't close. McGrath was expecting this. That's why we're using jigs. Kaiser's people are shipping us precision steel frames that hold each module to exact specifications while we build. The Navy's already tested this at Bath Iron Works on a trial basis. It works, but it's never been done this fast, and never on this scale. He pauses, scanning the faces. These men have built 11 destroyer Escorts over the past year. They know every inch of the design, every rivet, every weld. They're not just labor, they're craftsmen, artisans, who take pride in their work. And he's asking them to abandon everything they know. I'm not going to lie to you, McGrath continues, his voice quieter now. This is going to be hell. We're talking 3 shifts, round the clock. Some of you won't see your families for 2.5 weeks. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have failures. But here's what I know. You are the best shipbuilders in the United States Navy. If anyone can do this, it's the men standing in this room right now. The silence that follows is total. Even the distant sounds of the yard seem to fade. McGrath can see the calculation happening behind their eyes, the doubt wrestling with duty, exhaustion battling against pride. Then Tommy Delacroix steps forward. What do you need from me? McGrath exhales a breath he didn't know he was holding. I need you to divide your welders into 8 teams. Each team gets a module. And I need you to teach every single one of them that their welds aren't just holding steel together, they're holding men's lives together. Tommy nods slowly, then turns to the crowd. "You heard the man. Let's show those U-boat bastards what American steel can do." The response is immediate. Men begin moving, organizing, shouting questions about assignments and materials. The assembly hall erupts into controlled chaos as foremen huddle with their crews, sketching plans on scraps of paper, arguing about logistics and sequence. McGrath climbs down from the table and finds himself face to face with a young man, barely 20, with oil-stained hands and nervous eyes. His badge reads, Harris, J., apprentice fitter. "Sir," Harris says, his voice cracking slightly, "my brother's on convoy duty in the Atlantic. He's on a merchant ship." McGrath puts a hand on the kid's shoulder. "Then let's make sure he's got an escort watching his back. You with me?" Harris nods, jaw set with sudden determination. "Yes, sir. Let's build him a ship." As the crowd disperses to their stations, McGrath catches sight of the empty slip through the hall's open doors. By tonight, the keel will be laid. By next week, the impossible will be taking shape. 17 days. The clock is already ticking. February 14th, 1944. Day 3, 1,400 hours. The Hingham Shipyard is transformed into something that looks less like a shipyard and more like a battlefield where the weapons are cranes and the ammunition is steel. 8 separate work zones sprawl across the facility, each one a hive of sparks and noise and organized chaos. In Zone A, the bow section takes shape on a massive jig, a steel skeleton that holds the curved hull plates in perfect alignment while welders seal them together. In Zone F, 300 yards away, the stern assembly rises on its own jig, completely independent, as if 2 different ships are being born simultaneously. McGrath moves between the zones like a general inspecting his troops, his clipboard thick with hourly progress reports. He's already lost 6 pounds he can't afford to lose, surviving on black coffee and the adrenaline that comes from watching the impossible become real. His eyes are bloodshot. His hands shake slightly when he lifts his coffee mug, but his voice remains steady as he shouts corrections over the din. In Zone C, Tommy Delacroix is doing what he does best, making the unmakeable work. He's suspended 20 feet in the air on a bosun's chair, his welding torch throwing blue-white light across the midship bulkhead. The steel here is 3/4 of an inch thick, and every bead has to be perfect. One weak weld and the whole section could fail under the stress of Atlantic storms. "Hold steady!" Tommy shouts to his partner below, who's feeding him rod. The torch hisses and spits as he runs a seam along a vertical joint, the molten metal flowing like honey, cooling to iron-hard permanence in seconds. When he finishes and flips up his hood, the weld looks like a machine made it perfectly uniform. No porosity, no slag inclusions. But perfection takes time, and time is the one thing they don't have. "Tommy!" McGrath's voice cuts through the noise. "We're 4 hours behind on the midship module." Tommy descends from his perch, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the February cold. "Bill, I can go faster or I can go right. I can't do both." "Then teach someone else to go right while you go fast." McGrath thrusts a roster at him. "I've got 6 welders coming in from the Boston Navy Yard. They're certified, they're good, and they need to learn your technique in the next 2 hours. Tommy stares at the list, then back at McGrath. "You're asking me to train people while I'm also welding critical seams? Bill, that's necessary." McGrath's voice softens slightly. "I know what I'm asking, but we can't bottleneck on one man's skill, even if that man's the best we've got. We need to multiply you." For a moment, Tommy looks like he might argue. Then he glances over at the midship section, at the skeleton of steel that will soon house diesel engines and ammunition magazines and the men who will fight from this ship. He nods slowly. "Okay, but they follow my standards. No shortcuts. Wouldn't expect anything less." By 1600 hours, Tommy has 6 welders arranged around him in a semicircle, demonstrating his technique on a practice plate. "You're not just melting metal," he tells them, his voice carrying the thick molasses drawl of Louisiana. "You're creating a bond at the molecular level. The rod becomes part of the base metal. If you rush it, You get porosity, little air pockets that'll crack under stress. If you go too slow, you get distortion. The heat warps the plate. You want that sweet spot where the puddle flows just right, like butter in a hot pan. He strikes an arc and runs a perfect bead while they watch. See how I'm moving? Consistent speed, consistent angle. It's like dancing. You get the rhythm wrong, your partner falls. One of the new welders, a woman named Rose Patek, who transferred in from a riveting crew, raises her hand. What if the plates don't fit perfectly? What if there's a gap? Tommy grins. Then you improvise. You can gap fill up to an 1/8 inch if you know what you're doing. But that's advanced stuff. For now, just focus on making your beads pretty. While Tommy trains his team, McGrath moves to Zone E, where the superstructure is being assembled. This is the destroyer Escort's brain, where the pilot house, the combat information center, and the radio shack will be housed. It's also the most complex section, with dozens of compartments that have to be precisely positioned for the ship's balance and stability. Chief Naval Inspector Harold Wickham stands beside the emerging structure, his Navy uniform crisp despite the industrial grime around him. He's holding a level against a bulkhead, and his expression suggests he's found something he doesn't like. Foreman McGrath, Wickham says without looking up, this frame is 2 degrees off vertical. McGrath's stomach drops. How off vertical? 2 degrees. That's within tolerance for merchant construction, but this is a warship. If the pilot house is canted, the gyro compass readings will be skewed. Navigation errors in the mid-Atlantic can kill as surely as a torpedo. McGrath looks at the massive steel framework, already welded at a dozen points. To tear it down and rebuild would cost them 8 hours minimum, 8 hours they absolutely don't have. Can we shim it? He asks. Wickham finally looks at him. You want to fix a crooked superstructure with shims? That's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Inspector, I'm not asking if it's ideal. I'm asking if it's safe. The silence stretches out. Around them, the work continues. Hammers ringing, torches hissing, men shouting measurements and instructions. Wickham sets down his level and pulls out a slide rule, running quick calculations. If you shim it at the base and reinforce the mounting points with gusset plates, he finally says, and if you recheck the compass calibration after installation, then yes, technically it's safe. But McGrath, you're building this ship on a razor's edge. Every shortcut, every improvisation they add up, one too many, and this whole thing could fail. Then we won't take one too many. McGrath claps the inspector on the shoulder. We'll shim it, reinforce it, and double-check everything. Because failing isn't an option. Wickham watches him walk away, then shakes his head and makes a note on his clipboard. Around him, the steel forest of the superstructure continues to grow, section by section, weld by weld. As the sun sets on day 3, McGrath stands at the edge of the main assembly slip. The keel is laid. The bow section is 60% complete. The stern is taking shape. 8 separate pieces of a warship, being built simultaneously by 300 men who are rewriting the rules of shipbuilding with every shift. 17 days, 14 to go. February 19th, 1944. Day 8, 0, 3, 2, 7 hours. The accident happens during the graveyard shift, when exhaustion makes men careless and the cold makes steel brittle. McGrath is in the yard office, reviewing the day's progress reports over his 5th cup of coffee. When he hears it, a sound like thunder, followed by shouting that cuts through even the constant background roar of the shipyard. He's out the door before his chair stops spinning, running across the frozen ground toward Zone B, where a crowd is forming, their faces lit by the harsh work lights. The bow section's lifting crane has dropped its load, 40 tons of pre-fabricated bow plating the curved steel that will cut through Atlantic waves lies twisted on the ground like a crumpled beer can. The lifting cables dangle uselessly overhead, one of them snapped clean through, and underneath the wreckage, partially visible, is a man's leg. Get the lifting gear, now! McGrath is shouting before he even reaches the scene. Men are already scrambling, bringing smaller cranes, acetylene torches, anything that might shift the massive weight. Tommy Delacroix is there, along with Frank Murphy and a dozen others, their hands already bloody from trying to lever the steel with pry bars. "Who is it?" McGrath demands. "Jimmy Castellano." Someone answers. "He was guiding the load when the cable snapped." McGrath's blood runs cold. Castellano is a rigger, 23 years old, married 3 months ago to a girl from Dorchester. McGrath was at the wedding. "Is he breathing?" "Yeah, but he's pinned from the waist down. We can't get him out without lifting this thing. And if we lift it wrong, the whole mass could shift and crush him completely." McGrath drops to his knees beside the wreckage. Through a gap in the twisted metal, he can see Castellano's face pale, slicked with sweat, eyes wide with shock and pain. "Jimmy, can you hear me?" "Mr. McGrath." The voice is surprisingly steady. "I can't feel my legs." "Don't worry about that right now. We're getting you out. You just hold on. You understand? That's an order." "Yes, sir." Frank Murphy has the auxiliary crane in position. Its cables already being threaded through the wreckage. "Bill, we've got one shot at this. If we lift from the wrong angle, the whole thing pivots, and we lose him." McGrath stands, his mind racing through the physics, the angles, the weight distribution. Around him, 300 men have stopped working. The entire shipyard has gone silent, except for Castellano's labored breathing and the distant wail of an ambulance. "We lift from the northeast corner," McGrath says. 45-degree angle. We take the weight gradually. Frank, you watch for any shift. If it starts to pivot even an inch, you stop. Tommy, you and 4 men stand by with timbers. The second we get clearance, you shove them under to hold the weight. "What if it doesn't work?" someone asks. McGrath doesn't answer. He nods to Frank, who signals the crane operator. The cable goes taut. The crane's diesel engine roars as it takes the strain. The twisted bow section groans, metal screaming against metal, but it doesn't move. 40 tons of steel, compressed and tangled, refuses to budge. "More power," McGrath orders. "Bill, if we pull harder and the cable snaps." Frank starts. "I said more power." The engine note rises to a howl. The cable vibrates like a guitar string. And then, impossibly, the wreckage shifts. 1 inch, 2 inches, 6 inches. Timbers. Now. Timbers. Tommy and his crew dive forward, jamming massive oak beams under the lifted edge. The moment they're in place, Frank eases off the cable, letting the weight settle onto the wood. The gap is barely 2 feet, but it's enough. 2 men slide into the space, grabbing Castellano under the arms. They pull him free in one smooth motion, dragging him clear just as one of the timbers cracks with a sound like a gunshot. The bow section settles back down with a ground-shaking thud. The ambulance crew is there immediately, loading Castellano onto a stretcher. McGrath catches a glimpse of the injury. The left leg is badly crushed, possibly broken in multiple places, but the kid is conscious, even managing a weak thumbs up as they carry him away. The siren fades into the distance. 300 men stand in the sudden silence, staring at the wreckage of 8 days' work lying in a twisted heap. Tommy approaches McGrath, his voice quiet. "That's at least 60 hours of work destroyed. We're already behind schedule. Bill, we can't. We rebuild it." McGrath's voice is flat, drained of emotion. "We rebuild it tonight." "Bill, I said we rebuild it." The shout echoes across the yard. McGrath's hands are shaking, his face flushed. "We don't have time to mourn. We don't have time to doubt." Every hour we waste is another convoy that sails without enough escorts. So we pick up that steel, we cut out the damaged sections, we weld in new plates, and we get back on schedule. That's what Jimmy would want. That's what those boys in the Atlantic need. He turns to face the assembled workers. Most of them look shell-shocked, their faces gray with exhaustion and fear. This is the moment McGrath realizes the breaking point, where they either fold or push through. "I know you're tired," he says, his voice carrying across the silent yard. "I know you're scared. I know this seems impossible. But I'm going to tell you something that Jimmy Castellano told me at his wedding last November. He said, 'Mr. McGrath, my pop fought in the last war. He always told me that when things get hard, you find out what you're really made of. Well, gentlemen, things just got hard. So what are we made of? The silence holds for 3 long seconds. Then Tommy Delacroix picks up his welding torch and strikes an arc. The blue-white flame illuminates his face as he looks at McGrath. We're made of American steel, boss. Let's get to work. One by one, the others return to their stations. The hammers start ringing again. The cranes resume their mechanical ballet. Within 15 minutes, a crew is cutting away the damaged bow sections while another team brings fresh plates from the storage yard. McGrath walks to the edge of the dock and stands there for a moment, looking out at Boston Harbor. The eastern sky is just beginning to lighten dawn, coming to day 8. 9 days left. The bow section destroyed. A man in the hospital with injuries that might end his career, and 300 men who just proved they won't quit. He pulls out his pocket watch, a gift from his father, who built wooden fishing boats before the war, and checks the time, 0408 hours. The graveyard shift ends in 2 hours. The day shift will arrive to find the bow section already half rebuilt, rising from disaster like a phoenix from ashes. Behind him, Tommy is already training a replacement rigger, showing him how to read the cable tensions, how to signal the crane operator, how to stay safe in a workplace where every mistake can kill. 17 days. It still seems impossible. But maybe, McGrath thinks as he turns back toward the yard, impossible is just another word for what hasn't been done yet. February 26th, 1944. Day 15, 0530 hours. The final assembly begins in darkness, under portable floodlights that turn the Hingham Shipyard into a stage for industrial ballet. The 8 modules built separately over 14 days of grinding, relentless labor are about to become one ship. Or they're about to become 8 pieces of expensive scrap metal that don't fit together. McGrath stands at the edge of the main slip, watching 4 massive cranes position themselves around the bow section. This is the moment where Henry Kaiser's revolutionary theory meets brutal reality. Every measurement, every tolerance, every weld from the past 2 weeks either adds up correctly or it doesn't. There's no middle ground. Bow section, ready for lifting. Frank Murphy's voice crackles over the yard's loudspeaker system. All personnel clear the zone. The cranes engage simultaneously, their cables going taut with mathematical precision. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the bow section rises from its assembly jig. 45 tons of curved steel, bristling with temporary support brackets and marked with chalk lines showing where it will mate with the midship section. It hangs in the air like a held breath. Forward 10 feet. McGrath orders into his radio. Steady. Steady. The cranes move in perfect synchronization, walking the bow section toward the keel that's been waiting in the slip. Tommy Delacroix stands on the keel itself, holding a laser level and a set of precision calipers, ready to verify that everything aligns within the Navy's ruthless tolerances measured in 30 seconds of an inch. The bow section descends, 6 inches from contact, 3 inches, 1 inch. Hold. Tommy's voice cuts through the tension. He's checking the alignment points, his level pressed against the mating surface. McGrath can see him making micro-adjustments with hand signals, guiding Frank Murphy's crane operators with gestures that look almost like conducting an orchestra. Forward point 1 to 5 feet, port side down 0.03. Hold. Check again. Every man in the yard is watching now. The day shift arrived an hour early, unwilling to miss this moment. They stand in clusters, coffee cups steaming in the pre-dawn cold, watching 300 miles of welding and 2 weeks of impossible deadlines come down to whether Tommy Delacroix says the magic word. Tommy walks the perimeter one more time, checking every alignment point, every mating surface. He climbs down from the keel and approaches McGrath, his face unreadable. "Well?" McGrath asks, his voice hoarse from 2 weeks of shouting orders. Tommy breaks into a grin. "She's perfect. Within 1/64th inch on all points. I don't know how the hell we did it, but every section fits like a Swiss watch." McGrath closes his eyes for a moment, feeling 2 weeks of tension drain from his shoulders. Then he keys his radio. "Mate the bow section. Let's build a warship." The cranes lower the bow into place with a solid metallic thunk that reverberates through the slip. Before it's even fully settled, Tommy's welding teams are swarming over it, their torches already striking arcs, fusing the bow to the keel with beads of molten steel. Over the next 6 hours, the destroyer Escort comes together like a massive three-dimensional puzzle. Midship section, engine room modules, stern assembly. Each piece weighing tens of tons, each lowered with millimeter precision. Each welded into place by teams who've been running on coffee and determination for 15 straight days. By noon, the hull is complete. By 1600 hours, the superstructure is in place. By 2000 hours, Inspector Wickham is walking the deck with his clipboard, checking off items that shouldn't be possible to check this fast. The engine mounts are properly aligned, he says, almost accusatory, as if McGrath has somehow cheated physics. The propeller shaft is centered. The fuel tanks are sealed and pressure tested. The electrical systems are 70% complete. Foreman McGrath: I've been inspecting ships for the Navy for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Is she seaworthy? McGrath asks bluntly. Wickham looks at him for a long moment. Pending final sea trials. Yes, she's seaworthy. She's a United States Navy destroyer Escort, built in 15 days instead of 45, and against every expectation I had, she's actually going to float. McGrath allows himself a small smile. 16 days, Inspector. We've still got 1 day left. The final day is a sprint. Gun mounts are installed and calibrated. The radio equipment goes in, along with the radar mast. The depth charge racks are welded to the stern. The life rafts are secured. Paint crews work through the night, covering the gray primer with navy gray enamel. The ship's number DE 635 is stenciled on the bow in crisp white paint. February 27th, 1944. Day 17, 1100 hours. The launch ceremony is small. There's no time for fanfare when there are more ships to build. But a crowd has gathered anyway. The yard workers, their families, naval officers from Boston, and a handful of reporters who've heard rumors of what happened here. And in the front row, in a wheelchair with his left leg in a cast, is Jimmy Castellano. McGrath approaches him before the ceremony. Jimmy, you should be in the hospital. And miss this? Castellano grins, though pain tightens the corners of his eyes. Mr. McGrath, I bled for this ship. I'm gonna see her hit the water. Your leg, the doctors say you'll walk again, right? They say maybe. Maybe with a limp. But that's okay. He pats the wheelchair's armrest. I figure I got off easy. That bow section could have crushed me flat. Instead, I get to watch her sail. That's a fair trade. A Navy Captain McGrath doesn't recognize takes the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to commission USS England, DE 635, into service with the United States Navy. This vessel was built in 17 days by the men and women of Hingham Shipyard, using innovative construction techniques that represent the future of American naval production. She will join the Pacific Fleet, where she will hunt enemy submarines and protect our convoys. She is a testament to American industrial might and the unbreakable will of American workers. The crowd applauds. McGrath doesn't hear it. He's staring at the ship, his ship, their ship, as she sits in the slip, ready for the water. Every rivet, every weld, every impossible hour is represented in those 1,400 tons of steel. I christened the USS England, a Navy chaplain says, swinging a bottle of champagne against the bow. The glass shatters in a spray of foam. May God bless this ship and all who sail in her. The blocks are knocked away. The ship begins to slide down the greased rails into Boston Harbor. She hits the water stern first, sending up a tremendous wave, and for one heart-stopping moment, McGrath thinks she might tip, might capsize, might prove that 17 days was too fast after all. But she settles into the water as smoothly as if she'd been there her whole life. She floats. She rides, high, and proud, her bow cutting the morning sun's reflection into silver fragments. The crowd erupts into cheers. Men are hugging, slapping backs, some openly crying. Tommy Delacroix finds McGrath in the chaos and grabs his hand, shaking it hard enough to hurt. "We did it, Bill. We actually did it." "No," McGrath says, looking at the faces around him, the welders, the fitters, the crane operators, the electricians, the women from the riveting crews, Jimmy Castellano in his wheelchair. They did it. Every single one of them. That afternoon, as the tugs guide England toward the outfitting dock where her final equipment will be installed, McGrath receives another telegram. He reads it standing on the same dock where he read the first one. 15 days that feel like 15 years ago. DE 635 accepted with honors. Hingham Shipyard authorized to repeat process. Expect orders for DE 636 through DE 660. Kaiser sends congratulations. You've changed how we build ships. You've changed how we win wars. McGrath folds the telegram and looks out at the harbor, where USS England rides at anchor, her American flag snapping in the afternoon breeze. In 6 months, she'll sink 6 Japanese submarines in 12 days, a record that will never be broken. She'll save countless lives. She'll help win the Pacific War. But right now, she's just a ship. A ship built in 17 days by men who refused to accept impossible. And in the Hingham Shipyard, the cranes are already positioning the keel plates for DE 636. The work continues. The war continues. But something has changed. America has proven it can outbuild, outproduce, and outthink any enemy on Earth. One shipyard, one foreman, one impossible deadline at a time.